Moments ago, Britain was thrown into a political firestorm so intense that even seasoned insiders are calling it the most dramatic moment in modern history. In an unprecedented move that stunned Westminster, shattered Labour's top ranks, and ignited fury across the country, the Supreme Court delivered a devastating ruling that left Starmer with no way out within minutes. Pressure from judges, rebels, and even quiet voices inside the palace became too powerful to resist. And just like that, the man who promised stability, the man who claimed he would restore trust, found himself cornered, isolated, and forced into the very fate he had spent years denying. Resignation. The nation is now in chaos. Trust in government has collapsed overnight, and the echoes of this political earthquake are shaking every chamber of power. From Downing Street to Buckingham Palace, the truth is brutal. And it landed like a hammer. For weeks, rumors circulated of a hidden legal conflict brewing between Starmer's government and the judiciary. But no one expected the Supreme Court to step forward today with a ruling so explosive that it effectively declared the Prime Minister in breach of constitutional duty. The judgment wasn't just a legal critique. It was a public rebuke. A warning shot delivered in the strongest language the court has used in decades. And the implications were immediate. Phones lit up across Westminster. Civil servants froze mid-task. Cabinet ministers vanished behind closed doors. Then came the first signs of fracture. Resignations, leaks, and frantic attempts to contain panic. By midday, Starmer's authority had evaporated. As news spread, Britain erupted. Crowds formed outside Parliament, half cheering, half demanding more answers. The atmosphere felt like the country had stepped into a moment that would define its future. Commentators struggled to keep up. Opposition parties smelled blood. And inside Number 10, Starmer faced something he had never confronted before. Not criticism, not rebellion, but the cold realization that the system he once used to rise had now turned against him. A prime minister cannot survive a direct constitutional challenge. He knew it. His party knew it. The palace certainly knew it. What made the situation even more combustible was the quiet but unmistakable involvement of the monarchy. While King Charles said nothing publicly, insiders whispered of deep concern behind the scenes. The court's ruling hinted at conversations between senior judges and the palace. Conversations about protecting the stability of the nation. And if those whispers are true, it means something unprecedented happened today. The constitutional balance shifted. The monarchy did not intervene, but its silence carried weight, and Starmer felt it like a blade hanging above him. As pressure mounted, prominent Labour MPs broke ranks. Some called for calm. Others quietly urged Starmer to resign for the good of the country. And then came the final blow. A leaked message from within Starmer's own inner circle, describing the ruling as fatal and calling the Prime Minister's position unsustainable. That leak spread across social media within seconds, dragging his leadership into humiliation and confirming what many had already sensed. This was the end inside Downing Street. The mood turned cold. Senior advisors stopped taking calls. Longtime allies began distancing themselves, and the man at the center of the storm sat alone, watching everything he had built crumble. In real time. He had no power left, no authority, no shield. The court's ruling had taken everything. What followed was the moment Britain will remember forever. Starmer stepping forward, voice trembling but controlled, announcing he had been left with no choice but to resign. But this is only the beginning. Because while Starmer's exit shocked the nation, the deeper story, the one unfolding behind locked doors, reveals a level of political betrayal, judicial confrontation, and royal tension unlike anything Britain has faced in decades. The fallout is just starting. Alliances are breaking. And the country, already fragile, is now hurtling into a new and dangerous chapter. The shock of Starr's resignation had barely settled before the deeper, darker truth began to surface. A truth far more unsettling than a simple political collapse. As Westminster scrambled to regain its footing, insiders leaked details of the Supreme Court's ruling, revealing that the bombshell verdict was not merely about a single policy breach, but a pattern of constitutional overreach carried out quietly across Starr's administration. The court accused the government of bypassing parliamentary scrutiny, concealing key reports, and undermining judicial independence. These findings didn't just damage Starmer's credibility, they detonated it. Overnight, his leadership went from embattled to disgraced. And Britain woke up to the terrifying possibility that its own prime minister may have crossed lines no leader should ever cross. But the true explosion came when documents surfaced as showing that senior members of Starr's cabinet had known about the brewing legal confrontation, but chose to hide it from the public. Suddenly, the story shifted from one man's downfall to a full-scale labor implosion. Cabinet ministers were accused of betrayal. Advisors were accused of lying, and MPs were accused of protecting power rather than protecting the country. The fury within the Labour Party became a spectacle of political cannibalism. Factions blaming each other, allies turning into enemies, and once loyal supporters now describing Starr's government as the most deceptive leadership in decades. Panic spread through the party like fire, leaving behind a trail of broken alliances and whispers of a mass purge. On the streets, public anger ignited into something deeper. A crisis of trust that threatened the very foundations of British democracy. Protesters marched with signs demanding accountability, demanding transparency, demanding justice. Some celebrated Starmer's downfall as the beginning of a national reset, while others feared a future of instability and power vacuums. Social media erupted with theories, accusations, and warnings, turning the country into a battlefield of opinions. Every hour brought new leaks. Every headline raised new fears, and every political commentator admitted the same unsettling truth. The country had entered uncharted territory. As this chaos unfolded, one question consumed the national conversation. Who knew what? And when? That question grew even more dangerous when whispers spread about tensions between Number 10 and the palace. During the final weeks, insiders claimed that private messages had been exchanged between senior royal advisers and judicial figures, expressing alarm over Starmer's attempts to push certain legislation. Despite constitutional warnings, although the palace denied any interference, its concern was unmistakable. And in a constitutional monarchy, concern from the crown is more powerful than any public statement. The fact that such conversations allegedly happened at all revealed just how fragile the nation had become. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, Parliament descended into panic as MPs scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. Opposition leaders demanded a full investigation into Starmer's conduct. Some called for criminal proceedings. Others warned that allowing the crisis to appear weak could trigger a collapse in public faith. The Speaker struggled to maintain order as shouting filled the chamber and accusations flew from every direction, turning the House of Commons into a theater of rage and desperation. The economic consequences hit just as hard. Markets reacted instantly with the pound falling and investors fearing instability. Business leaders sent frantic messages to the Treasury, demanding reassurance. But there was nothing steady to offer. Britain was leaderless, directionless, and on the brink of a crisis that stretched beyond politics. Without a stable government, the nation found itself in a dangerous vacuum where fear, uncertainty, and confusion dictated every decision. But the most explosive moment of the day came when a senior Supreme Court insider revealed something chilling: the decision forcing Starr's resignation was not unanimous. Some judges believed the situation was even more serious than the public ruling suggested, pushing for a harsher condemnation. Others feared such a step would plunge Britain into deeper chaos. This divide exposed the magnitude of the constitutional crisis. Even the highest court in the land had been shaken, torn between protecting the nation and exposing the full truth. By the time night fell, Britain was a different country. Starmer was gone. But the damage he left behind continued to spread like cracks across the foundation of the state. And as new leaks emerged, new alliances formed, and new threats began to rise, one thing became clear: this crisis was far from over. In fact, the true battle, the one for Britain's future, had only just begun. As dawn broke over a shaken nation, the true scale of Britain's power struggle began to reveal itself. Starr's resignation had removed the face of the crisis. But it had not removed the crisis itself. Instead, it opened a door to something far more volatile. A battle for control of a fractured government, a frightened public, and a country standing at the edge of a constitutional reckoning. For the first time in decades, the United Kingdom found itself without a clear leader, without a stable direction, and with institutions questioning one another's authority. In full view of the world, the Labour Party, once confident and united, now resembled a collapsing empire. Senior figures scrambled to claim innocence while discreetly maneuvering for power. Several MPs positioned themselves as potential successors, insisting they could restore trust, even as leaked messages exposed their own involvement in the crisis. Others warned that any attempt to install a new leader without a general Election would spark a legitimacy war. And beneath it all, a chilling truth emerged. The constitutional fallout had badly damaged Labour's moral authority. It was no longer a simple leadership contest. It was a fight for the party's survival. A desperate bid to prevent total implosion as public trust dissolved like sand through open fingers. Inside Westminster, the tension grew unbearable. Civil servants described meetings filled with panic, confusion, and fear. Nobody knew who held real authority. Nobody knew what legal boundaries still stood firm, and nobody knew how far the Supreme Court's ruling would reach. Some believed additional investigations were inevitable. Others feared that the court might target deeper layers of government, exposing a network of decisions that went far beyond Star. Rumors spread of hidden files, suppressed warnings, and secret communications between departments, each hinting at a scandal broader and more damaging than the nation had yet been told. The uncertainty created a climate of dread that hung over the government like a dark fog. Meanwhile, all eyes turned to Buckingham Palace, where silence had become a message more powerful than words. The king made no public statement, but insiders reported an atmosphere of grave concern. Advisors were said to be monitoring the crisis hour by hour, aware that any misstep could trigger accusations of interference or negligence. Yet, their very presence, their quiet interest in the unfolding chaos, created a sense that the monarchy stood ready to steady the nation if Parliament failed to do so. Some MPs quietly urged the palace to intervene with a symbolic gesture. Others whispered that the king had already taken discreet steps behind the scenes to ensure stability should the crisis deepen. Though nothing was confirmed, the mere possibility that the palace was preparing contingency plans sent shockwaves through Westminster for a constitutional monarchy. Even the hint of preparation signaled how dangerously close Britain was to the edge. As political battles intensified, the public mood darkened. Citizens watched anxiously as leadership hopefuls made desperate television appearances, offering promises of calm while projecting anything but confidence. Polling agencies reported the fastest collapse in trust ever recorded. Communities across the country expressed fears of economic uncertainty, rising division, and a government spiraling out of control. Local councils pleaded for clarity. Charities warned of funding freezes. Hospitals braced for disruptions bans if the crisis escalated further. And then came another blow. Previously, sealed documents authorized for release under emergency parliamentary order revealed that the constitutional breaches addressed by the Supreme Court were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader series of disputed decisions spanning months. These documents highlighted repeated warnings issued to Number 10. Warnings that had been ignored, dismissed, or buried. The revelation deepened the crisis, painting a picture of a government that had knowingly walked into conflict with the judiciary. The Labour Party's internal structure continued to fracture. Leadership campaigns erupted overnight, each more chaotic than the last.